welcome everybody, and thank you for being here today. Thank you to the organizers, Justin and everyone. I think, as has been the case in years past, this a great event, and I think as an American living in London, working across Europe and the US as well, it's always a treat to see so many people from so many different markets organized in the same place. This has always been a great opportunity to have a very open dialogue and candor, and hopefully we can do so today. Just to level set with everyone, at least as it relates to Videology, I'm not really going to talk about us as a company today. The request and where I'm focusing is a little bit more on what's happening in the TV industry, not only here in Europe, but some of the bigger trends we're seeing driven out of the US. The presentation, The Fourth Age of Advertising, is I'm always a big believer in reading books that the subtitle really tells you a little bit more about the presentation than the actual title of the book. Lacking a subtitle, it would probably be something I use with my son quite a bit, which is, it's time to man up. Which for me with my son means it's time to get active, it's time to get into actually doing something and stop staring at your navel and start actually taking action. And we'll talk about this as we go through the presentation, but this industry is actually in a very good place. And we as Videology, as a company, have always philosophically just believed very strongly that the future solution of TV was going to come from TV outward versus digital disrupting it and collecting pieces. And so as I talk about this today, one of the things you'll hear a theme repeated back time and time again is there is a tremendous amount of disruption going on in this industry, things that are benefiting companies like ours and some of the people in the audience, but also things that are causing a lot of fear, which is at times a very good thing. So when we talk about stages of change, I talk about the fourth stage of change, and this is something I'll come back to as we finish the presentation. But if you look at any kind of situation in life, whether it's trying to quit smoking or whether it's trying to lose weight, tapping into kind of the world of psychologists, they'll look at four stages of change: pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, and then ultimately getting up and manning up and taking some action. For us, we can actually apply the same standard to the TV industry. So prior to 2005, you're talking about an industry that was 100% broadcast-based television. A company, an industry that was growing year after year ahead of GDP, and there wasn't a lot of need to make change. The second stage hit is we started to see innovations come. The iPhone coming out, YouTube coming out and being bought by Google. A lot of people starting to realize that there were opportunities out there that went above and beyond cable television, satellite broadcasting, or over-the-air television. And I would say that the space where our business and where we started to see the real change across the industry happened in that third phase, like 2010, probably more 2012 to 2016. And what we noticed was this is when some of the disruptive activity started to happen in the industry. We started to see ratings, especially ratings amongst some of the key audiences that are most important to advertisers, fall off. You started to see that digital dollars were catching up with TV dollars in terms of spending. You saw advertising technologies proliferating. And one of the things that we saw most, and it was more of a US phenomenon, but we've now seen it kind of pass into other big TV markets around the world, was the softening of the annual trading season. So the 2014-15 trading season in North America and the US market was very soft. And as a business, our business up till that point in time had been largely with major buy-side participants in the industry, major TV buyers using our technology to shift money into digital distribution. Largely speaking, the sell side of the business had very little interest at that point in time in engaging. I mean, people in this room obviously have been engaging, thinking about these problems for many years, but in terms of large corporations looking to actually embrace technology and willing to move forward on it, it wasn't until fear entered the equation that we really saw a lot of people move. And we'll come back to that theme later on. But that fear drove some really interesting opportunities for us in the industry. And you saw people like Fox, people like NBC, now people like Turner and AT&T and DirecTV before it came part of AT&T, driving that. You see Sky in Europe doing similar things. The question for us was, what was kind of driving, that change? I've said it a couple of times, but I'm actually a bigger believer that fear is a bigger motivator than opportunity oftentimes. And I think we've seen that. I actually think we're seeing it transition to opportunity now. But what happened with the US market and what's happened in some of the major TV markets like the UK and Germany, Australia, Japan, around the world is you've seen that the changing audience dynamics are actually hitting the pocketbook or hitting the bonus check of key people. And that was actually when we really started to see the inbounds that we received as a company start to become more people like AT&T and DirecTV and Sky than the traditional agencies. They remain, our business remains very focused on ad agencies as well as supply side players, but it was really fascinating to see the year 2015 and forward. We've seen kind of a business shift just in terms of the number of customers, broadcasters as well as distributors, who are looking at technology as being a part of their future versus thinking they were going to retire before it needed to be dealt with. What's chaos look like? Well, linear TV share is one, and I don't want to belabor points that I think you guys have seen from a number of people over the course of the last couple of days. But TV share is shifting, and it's not just shifting in a general sense. It's shifting in the most important audiences, and it's shifting in the most important audience to advertisers. It's not that it's going away. We know that. It's actually shifting from a device perspective. Linear TV, on-demand TV are now virtually identical, and then you get into kind of the role of tablet, mobile in general, as well as PC video. TV really becomes a broad canvas, and if you look at a chart like this, you actually see what we see with a lot of our big supply side customers is the thesis, which is, I used to be able to deal with each one of these bars as a silo in and of itself. How do I actually migrate toward unifying those things? And what you'll see, and this is just a more, I guess, an industry trend we see, is that the customers who are doing the best on the sell side, and increasingly people on the buy side who are acting more like sell side players, are people who have access to data. It was asked in the previous speaker, but the ability to take data to unify those silos is becoming a real differentiator. It's what's driving a lot of consolidation in the industry for us right now. So when we look at the industry as a whole, the $200 billion global TV business, I actually think, I would argue, and I've presented in other situations before, that the TV value chain is going through a much more fundamental reordering right now than it has in its 70-year lifespan. If you look purely at the M&A activity, if you look at the consolidation activity, if you look at the companies that are diving into the TV space, you're talking about things like AT&T buying Time Warner. You're talking about Fox trying to potentially sell its assets to a number of different suitors right now. You're looking at people like Oracle. You're looking at people like Adobe, people like Google, all putting a lot of money into having a place at the table and being a part of that value chain. What was traditionally, largely speaking, a cabal of people on the supply and demand side who traded this market is rife for disruption right now. And as with a lot of things, disruption, it can bring good things and it can bring bad things. But being a specialist in this market going forward seems to be a limiting factor. What we've seen is that, historically you had people who were distributors, content creators, or monetization experts. And it sort of allowed you to exist as one of those individual silos. Now, if you don't have those three silos covered yourself, you're actually at a disadvantage to other competitors. So some of that chaos is actually leading to behavioral change. So we know, and you can look from 2011 up to 2020, that as content creation has become more and more digital and the distribution has become more and more digital, the audiences has followed those sources of content, and as such, so have the advertising dollars. So when you look at that, you say, okay, well, how does this change? And for a lot of people in this industry, and I would argue a lot of people who attend this conference, there is a lot of hand-wringing in terms of how do we make sure that that light blue bar doesn't continue to go down, as opposed to embracing how do we treat it as one bar collectively. I would say if you look at the beneficiaries of this shift toward the digital space, it's pretty obvious, and a lot of people have seen stats about the growth and how it's being captured by a duopoly of Facebook and Google. And I think it's really important to point out that it's not just because they have a lot of money and they can buy customers. Those things are true, but they actually have a product that people are leaning into. And I think it's really important as we think about it as people who have a very TV-centric mentality, which I think a lot of people here do, I know I do, is that it's actually, it's not accurate to label it as not a great product. It's not accurate to label it as purely just buying business. I actually think there are aspects of what these companies have done which is appealing. The fact that they have pervasive data, the fact that they have the ability to unify things is a real threat. And that's where you start talking about the need to take action. If you're an MVPD and you have first-party data and you have multiple points of distribution and you're not doing these things, you're setting yourselves up for failure. The The other part of it is just having sheer scale. And I think this is where you start to see the digital side of the industry really move to a point where if other players, especially the traditional players in the television space, which if you were to compare the total viewership of television versus these stats would blow them out of the water. The point I want to make more and more, to my customers as well as to this audience is TV actually has a great amount of advantages when it comes to competing against this. Yes, there are data disadvantages and those things need to be figured out, but ultimately the opportunity in the market comes from how do you actually take that, look at the value chain and how it's going to reorder and understand where you're going to play. Because right now, a lot of the people that we're dealing with in the industry are looking at, the phrase is if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Looking at it purely through the historic lens of how they've looked at it and not saying this is how we are actually going to play and this is the position we're going to sit in the value chain going forward. And I'll be very blunt in saying it. When we talk to people who are entering the TV space, whether it's major consultancies like Deloitte or PwC, whether it's major technology companies like Oracle, they are looking at it and saying the value chain will look very different in 5 years than it looks today. And here's the place that we believe we will play. Versus saying, how do we keep the barbarians out? It's worth some consideration. And I think the way to get through it is action. If it hasn't been clear already. The opportunity comes from where the strength exists in TV. So the digital world oftentimes discounts the value of content quality, the value of what high quality environments really mean. So for us, we've always been, as a venture-backed technology company, the notion of most of my peer set is destroy industries and collect the spoils. We as a company, and me personally, have always been huge advocates of TV. Because it's not just kind of a philosophical belief, it was actually based on fact. And if you look at this chart, it really looks that content matters. And the speaker before me said, there is in television a huge premium on content quality. We also know that data targeting matters within the world of content, the middle slide, the middle section, and then finally that convergence matters. And this really is all looking at where it ultimately pans out in terms of channel lift. So what we know is that content quality matters, data targeting within that matters, and the ability to do it cross-device. Those are three aspects that the TV business and most of the distributors and broadcasters can tackle today. They are things that people like Google and Facebook and Amazon are tackling with much greater speed right now. So TV has this advantage. It builds upon the ability to go after TV and going after the next generation of TV, that fourth stage of TV. In our minds comes to how does the TV industry actually take some of those learnings from the digital experts and bring them in? What you look at, and again, I go back to that point I made earlier, which is there are really good things being done in the digital world that can be applied to TV. Again, it's not reinventing TV, but it's amplifying it with things that bring added functionality to TV that have never existed before. I'll give you an example. We work with Fox in North America. They sell a data-enhanced TV product off the back of our technology. It is literally the ability to take traditional linear television, apply new data sets to it, which actually allow a customer to buy someone in market for an auto versus just an age and gender. That simple modification has turned into tens of millions of dollars of business for them in a matter of a quarter. So think about that, and that is the slightest of innovation we could probably ever imagine. There's also momentum from the buy side of the industry, which we think is very valuable. 57% of the agencies that we've surveyed actually have used advanced TV in the past year, and 75% plan to use it in the year ahead. We also know that as they look at buying and planning, the buy side of the industry believes that over half of their spending, so 64% of those surveyed, believe that over 50% of their spending in the television space will be done programmatically. So that doesn't mean bidding, and that doesn't mean auctions. That means they will have automated systems that will allow them to transact in the TV space. A great example of that, we see this with AT&T in North America. They actually have opened up a portal. They white label our technology, put a portal out on the advertisers' desktops, and use it to access their first-party data and their inventory to buy into their environment. It's a safe way that they control, and for us, it gives that programmatic access to the agency so that they can achieve this target that they're talking about here. So going back to where we started, the fourth stage of television and where it goes, and in terms of that kind of the fourth stage being moving from contemplation to true action, our point of view and the recommendation we make to this crowd is play from your strengths. Look at in terms of what TV has, in terms of its protectable advantages, the fact that content quality is so great, the fact that you have control of distribution at this point in time, the fact that as certain types of businesses like MVPDs, you have data to fuel that. And if you don't, it's going to be taken from you. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we have seen very closely, and it's one of the things that's fueled our business is the fear that that golden goose of broadcast television is going to be stolen and kind of propagated for someone else's business is a really scary thing. I do think it's an industry-wide problem, but I do think some of those actions are going to need to be important. That's the point is ultimately the end goal is to get a converged marketplace going for us. We actually really think there's a lot going on. I don't want to come across as too aggressive and pessimistic. I actually have seen some of the things we're seeing in North America, in Europe right now are really encouraging. I think now it's the matter of getting those things from wonderful projects into scaled up wonderful projects. I think that's something that a lot of people in the audience are driving themselves. But it's look, it's the clock's ticking. I don't want to sugarcoat that point. I think there's probably one or two more of these events before the market's been defined and who's going to kind of be the leader. So, with that, I thought I would wrap it up a little bit and take some questions. Thank you for having me.
Questions from the audience? All right, I'll ask one.
Yeah.
Can I do that? Yeah. I thought the presentation earlier from the Swedish broadcaster TV4 was really interesting in that they were really focusing on transparency, right? Not kind of going a full digital model, but really have a lot of transparency with data and make digital kind of work towards that transparent television model. Are you seeing that with what are you seeing in terms of transparency and data on the sell side with the buy side?
Just so I can be specific on your question, are you talking about the transparency in terms of using first-party data from the sell side?
Like view through, right? Like into audience insights and so forth. Are you seeing a push with transparency?
We're not seeing it as much as you see it in the digital space. I mean, we bridge the gap between those businesses. So, I mean, I think there's just there has been a murky past of the digital space on a lot of fronts. So I think that has driven a lot of that concern. TV by its nature has always been a very trusted medium. So we're not seeing as much. I think where we do see it is new entrants into the TV space. So if you were a traditional agency lead in the digital space, you'll see a lot of those questions come up because those are very normal things. When we talk about kind of our customers who are running the TV buying group or the TV selling group, there is an inherent amount of trust in television, largely because it's so obvious and in your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it'll come more and more. We're not seeing a ton of it yet.
All right. Thanks very much, Ryan.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.